Good morning and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Bhante Suddhāso, and this morning we'll be looking at another discourse of the Buddha. This one from the Udana, chapter 4, sutta number 1, the Meghiyasutta. So we'll start with homage to the Buddha, and then I'll read through the discourse and give some explanations, and you can type in questions at any time. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So this morning we'll be looking at the Meghiyasutta from the Udana, chapter 4, sutta number 1. So this is a discourse the Buddha gave to a monk named Venerable Meghiya. The word Meghiya, by the way, comes from the word Megha, which means cloud. So Meghiya means cloudy. So the monk's name was Cloudy, which I find very cute. So the discourse begins. Thus have I heard. At one time the Buddha was staying near Chalika, on the Chalika mountain. Now at that time Venerable Meghiya was the Buddha's attendant. Then Venerable Meghiya went to the Buddha, bowed, stood to one side, and said to him, Bhante, I would like to enter Jantu village for alms. And the Buddha said, Please Meghiya, go at your convenience. Then in the morning, Meghiya put on his robe, took his bowl and robe, and entered Jantu village for alms. After the meal, on his return from alms round, he went to the shore of Kimikala river. As he was going for a walk along the shore of the river, he saw a lovely and delightful mango grove. When he saw this, he thought, Oh, this mango grove is lovely and delightful. This is good enough for striving, for a person who wants to strive. If the Buddha allows me, I'll come back to this mango grove to strive. Here I'm looking mainly at Bhante Suddhāso's translation, and here in some places he translates the word padana as striving, and in other places he translates it as meditating. But it's actually the same word, so the meaning of this is to apply oneself at training the mind. So translating it as meditating is actually acceptable as long as one understands the point here. The point is it's about making the effort to train the mind. So depending on the translation you're looking at, you might see that translated as striving or putting forth effort, or in the case of Bhante Suddhāso's translation, as meditating. Then Venerable Meghiya went to the Buddha, bowed, sat down to one side, and told him what had happened, adding, If the Buddha allows me, I will go back to that mango grove to meditate. When he had spoken, the Buddha said to him, We are alone, Meghiya. Wait until another monk comes. And for a second time, Meghiya said to the Buddha, Bhante, the Buddha has nothing more to do, and nothing that needs improvement. But I do. If you allow me, I will go back to that mango grove to meditate. So this is an interesting situation here. So we have this monk who is staying alone with the Buddha, which is actually a really ideal circumstance. So if you're going to be living one-on-one with another monk, then living one-on-one with a Buddha is just about the most ideal companion that one can imagine. And so he already has a really good situation, but he wants to go off by himself and practice on his own for a while. And he asks the Buddha permission to go off and practice on his own for a while, and the Buddha tells him no. So you would think he would be smart enough, when given a direct instruction by the Buddha, you would think he would be wise enough to follow that instruction. But no, he insists. He asks again a second time and a third time. Saying that, of course, the Buddha is already fully enlightened, but Meghiya says he himself is not, and he wants to go off on his own to meditate. Once again, you would think he'd be wise enough to realize that the Buddha was telling him to stay for his own benefit. But Meghiya apparently didn't get the hint, so again, he asks a third time for permission to go and practice on his own in that mango grove. And the Buddha says, Meghiya, since you speak of striving, what can I say? Meghiya, you can go at your own convenience. So finally the Buddha does give him permission. And so it says, then Meghiya got up from his seat, bowed, and having paid respects to the Buddha, he went to that mango grove, and having plunged deep into it, sat at the root of a certain tree for the day's abiding. One comment here on the translation for those who are reading from Bhante Suddhāso's translation. So in Pali we have the phrase padakinang katva. So padakina means respectful or appropriate. So padakinang katva means having done what was respectful or having done what was appropriate. So this has the sense of meaning paying respects. But in the translation here it says, respectfully circled the Buddha, keeping him on his right. So this is a very creative and interpretive rendering of the phrase padakinang katva, which is difficult to justify, as that's simply not what the phrase means. The phrase simply means having done what is respectful or having done what is appropriate. So this appears to be a case of where later Buddhist tradition of circumambulating a shrine or circumambulating a statue with one's right shoulder pointed towards the statue appears to have been backwritten into older texts. So again, so he paid respects to the Buddha, then he went to the mango grove and sat down for some meditation. And it says, but while Meghiya was meditating in that mango grove, he was beset mostly by three kinds of harmful, unwholesome thoughts, namely sensual thoughts, malicious thoughts, and cruel thoughts. Then he thought, oh, how incredible, how amazing. I have gone forth out of faith from the lay life to the homeless life, but I am still harassed by these three kinds of harmful, unwholesome thoughts, sensual thoughts, aversive thoughts, and cruel thoughts. So I also find this incredibly cute. So again, he goes off to meditate on his own. And while he's meditating, he spends most of his time rolling around in unwholesome mind states. He spends most of his time rolling around in unwholesome thoughts and emotions. So for anyone who's done any kind of extended meditation retreat, this might be familiar. It's like, oh, I'm going to go off and meditate, and I'm going to get jhana, and I'm going to have great samadhi, and I'm going to be joyful and peaceful, and I'm going to develop so much wisdom. And then you actually go and sit down to meditate, and you spend the whole time thinking about how much you want this, and how much you want that, and how much you hate this, and how much you hate that, and the mind just becomes completely immersed in its own defilements. So this is a very relatable experience that Meghiya is having here. And it's interesting also that he comments to himself. He's like, oh, out of faith in the Dhamma, I've become a monk. Yet even though I have this faith, I'm still overwhelmed by my own unwholesome thoughts. So again, this is very relatable. It's indicating how even though we initiate our Buddhist practice with a lot of faith and dedication, we still have to deal with the fact that our mind is filled with defilements. And the fact that the mind has very strong unwholesome habits, which are going to take a very long time to change. So it says, then in the late afternoon, Venerable Meghiya came out of retreat and went to the Buddha. He bowed, sat down to one side, and told the Buddha what had happened. So he tells the whole thing about trying to meditate and his mind being overwhelmed by unwholesome thoughts. And the Buddha says, Meghiya, when the liberation of the mind is not yet complete, 5 things help it come to completion. It says, what 5? First, a monk has good friends, good companions, and good associates. So the Pali word here is kalyana mitta. So kalyana, translated here simply as good. Kalyana has a bit more specific of a meaning. So first off, kalyana does have a generic secular meaning of meaning beautiful. But in this context, the word kalyana also has the meaning of somebody who is a spiritually good person. Someone who has a high standard of spiritual practice, somebody who has a commitment to morality and wisdom. So kalyana mitta, then, it doesn't just mean a good friend in the ordinary sense, or a beautiful friend in the ordinary sense, but rather it means the kind of person who is full of beautiful spiritual qualities, the kind of person with a sincere commitment to moral goodness and to wisdom. So the kind of person then who will encourage you and support you in practicing well. So this is a kalyana mitta. So the Buddha says, so when one is not yet completely fulfilled the liberation of mind, in other words, when one is not yet fully enlightened, this is the first of the 5 things that's really supportive. It's surrounding yourself with people who are committed to spiritual practice, who are committed to morality, committed to wisdom, and who therefore will help to encourage you and support you and inspire you in your own spiritual practice as well. Then the second thing, he says, second, a monk is moral, restrained according to the monastic code, conducting themselves well, and going in suitable places, and seeing danger in the slightest fault, they keep the training rules. So this is the same phrase that we discussed in some detail yesterday evening. Silava patimoka sangvara sangvuto harati achara gochara sampano anumate savaje subayudasavi samadaya sikati sikapadesu. So again, this important phrase, this important statement about committing oneself to following one's moral principles, committing oneself to good conduct, being careful where one spends one's time, watching out, so seeing the danger in any kind of misdeed, even minor misdeeds, and training oneself thoroughly in the training rules and the passive training, the precepts that the Buddha laid out. And the third thing that the Buddha recommends, as he says, furthermore, a monk takes part in conversations about humility that help to open the heart and lead to disillusionment, dispassion, cessation, peace, insight, awakening, and nibbana, whenever they wish, without trouble or difficulty. That is, talk about fewness of wishes, about contentment, seclusion, aloofness, arousing energy, morality, samadhi, wisdom, liberation, and the knowledge and vision of liberation. So this one is also interesting. So again, when talking about the things that support a good spiritual practice, well, first he mentions having good spiritual friends. Second, he mentions commitment to morality. And third, he talks about the importance of engaging in conversations about the Dhamma, conversations about spiritual practice. So conversations, and he gives some examples. He gives examples of talking about humility, first and foremost. Humility, translated here as self-effacement, which is a bit of an awkward and old translation. So the word is saleka, which means humility. So talk about humility, and talk about disenchantment, dispassion, cessation, serenity, insight, and awakening. Talk about nibbana, so the end goal of Buddhist practice. And talk about reducing one's desires, cultivating contentment, the value of seclusion, the value of aloofness, so of not being wrapped up in other people's business, not being intimately involved with other people. The value of cultivating energy, the value of practicing morality, of developing one's meditation practice, and the end goal, again, of Buddhist practice, the complete freedom of heart, liberation of mind. So the Buddha says this is another thing that's really important in our practice, is taking time to engage in sincere, profound conversations about the Dhamma. And it's important to note, though, that, again, of these qualities that the Buddha is talking about that support the practice, well, what did Meghiyasutta want to do? Meghiyasutta wanted to go off and be alone. Well, the first thing the Buddha says is, well, actually, being surrounded by good spiritual friends is a critical basis for practicing well. And then this third one about the value of engaging in conversations and discussions about the Dhamma. Again, you can't do that when you're alone. That requires that you have contact with other Dhamma practitioners. Then the fourth one, he says, a monk lives with energy aroused for giving up unwholesome qualities and for embracing wholesome qualities. They are strong, vigorous, and not slacking off when it comes to developing wholesome qualities. So this is about a commitment to goodness, the commitment to cultivating wholesome qualities in the mind. So this, of course, includes meditation practice, but it extends to everything that we do, all of our activities and involvements. And then the fifth one, he says, furthermore, a monk is wise. They have the wisdom which knows the arising and passing away, which is noble, penetrative, and leads to the complete ending of suffering. So this fifth one is the perception of impermanence. So udiyatigaminiya panyaya, it's the wisdom which knows arising and ceasing. The wisdom which recognizes the appearing and vanishing of phenomena in each moment. The wisdom which is constantly observing the continual change, the continual manifesting and cessation of all phenomena moment by moment. And the Buddha says that this constant observation of arising and ceasing, this constant observation of impermanence, is something which is noble. In other words, it leads to the noble attainments. It's penetrative. In other words, it penetrates through the fog of delusion and confusion. And it leads to the complete elimination of suffering, the complete elimination of dukkha. So here is one of the innumerable places in the suttas where the Buddha directly states that the recognition of impermanence, the practice of observing impermanence, observing the appearing and ceasing of phenomena, naturally leads to complete awakening. So then the Buddha continues. He says, a monk with good spiritual friends, companions, and associates can expect to be moral. So in other words, he's pointing out here, if you surround yourself with good people, then that will help you to yourself be a good person and practice morality well. He says a monk with good friends, companions, and associates can expect to take part in conversations about humility and so on. So when he goes through the same list of the various kinds of wholesome conversation he mentioned earlier. So again, if you surround yourself with good spiritual companions, then you'll be moral and you'll have good conversations about Dhamma. And next he says, a monk with good friends can expect to be energetic. Once again, it will support you. Like right now here at the monastery, we're engaging in an in-house meditation retreat. So you can feel the support of the community when we're all practicing together for many, many hours a day. We help support each other in commitment to the practice. And finally he says, a monk with good friends, companions, and associates can expect to be wise. Again, when we're all supporting each other in the practice, having good conversations about the Dhamma, reminding each other of what's important, reminding each other of the importance of observing impermanence, then all of that helps us to cultivate this direct observation of reality that the Buddha is describing, so that we can know it for ourselves. And the Buddha gives a further statement. He says, a monk grounded in these 5 things should develop 4 further things. So now he gives 4 more practices to add to that. He says first, they should develop the perception of non-beauty to give up greed. They should develop the loving kindness to give up hate. They should develop mindfulness of breathing to cut off thinking. And they should develop the perception of impermanence to uproot the concept of self-existence. And the Buddha further says, he says, when you recognize impermanence, the perception of non-self becomes stabilized. Perceiving non-self, you uproot the concept of self-existence and attain nibbana in this very life. So here the Buddha is giving, first of all, 4 meditation instructions, and these are very commonly practiced, especially in the monastic world. So the first one is the perception of non-beauty. So this is, in Pali, it's asubha. Subha means beauty. Asubha means non-beauty. So we should view all things as non-beautiful. This is not the same as saying that we should view things as ugly. So asubha is commonly mistranslated as ugliness or foulness or repulsiveness or so on. So, but this is a complete misunderstanding. We're actually trying to see the world as neither beautiful nor ugly. The world is not beautiful. The world is not ugly. Other people are not beautiful or ugly. So any object or experience is neither attractive nor repulsive. It just is exactly what it is. So this is developing a calm, cool, peaceful, non-reactive attitude towards all things. So when we see things as non-beautiful, then naturally we have no passion and lust and desire towards them. So this is why the Buddha says, asubha bhave taba ragasapahanaya. So the non-beauty, the perception of non-beauty leads to the abandoning of passion, of lust, of desire. Then he says loving kindness, metta, this universal benevolence and friendliness naturally leads to the abandoning of aversion, of hostility. That we cultivate a heart of kindness and friendliness towards the whole world. And then naturally we won't be aversive or hostile. And he says mindfulness of breathing helps to cut off thinking. So this is a very common meditation method, which is to focus your attention on your breathing, paying attention to the sensations of your breathing. And when doing so, then one will become less involved in discursive thought, and the mind will become increasingly quiet. And finally, he says the recognition of impermanence leads to the uprooting of the concept of self-existence, of asmi mana. So asmi means I am, and mana means concept. So asmi mana is the concept I am, the belief in self-existence, which is at the root of all of our suffering. So through recognizing the impermanence of all things, then we clearly see that whatever we think we are is constantly changing. Therefore, it can't possibly be our true nature, cannot possibly be our true self. And the Buddha says when we clearly see that, then this misconception of self-existence evaporates, and therefore one attains full awakening in this very life. Then the Buddha ends the line with a brief poem. So he says, lesser thoughts and subtle thoughts arise, springing up in the mind. Not understanding these thoughts, one with mind astray runs from one thing to the next. Having understood these thoughts that arise, springing up in the mind, an awakened one, ardent, restrained, and mindful, has given them up without remainder. So that's the end of this discourse. We can respect the sutta with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And I'll see if there's any questions. First of all, hello to the people checking in online. Hello to Gita, Bhumika, Maria, Yankee, Manal, Gregory, Anthony, and Christina. Good to see all of you. I don't see any questions though, so we'll go ahead and conclude at this time, and we'll see you this evening for the evening monk chat.